Kicking off the list at number 10, astronomy. You ever want to date somebody, but they're a Libra and you're a Gemini? Oh, ain't that the worst? Look, dating apps even have this now as a feature. You can write down what your symbol is, like, hi, I'm Kyle, I'm a Leo, and I love waking up early. Those are real bios for real people, and we have the Mayans to thank for all of this. The Maya studied the stars. They were the pioneers of our calendar, which I'll explain a little bit later on, but they also created lunar months. They figured that 81 lunar months added up to 2,392 days, meaning that one lunar month is 29.53 days, incredibly close to our modern moon month, which is crazy. They nailed it that long ago. They also studied Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury. They studied where each planet travels to and when. If you're a Libra, like me, smash that thumbs up. I'm a late Libra too. We're just trouble. We're the worst of the worst. Number 9, the Mayan calendar. It's 2022, which means the world thankfully did not end in 2012, but the Mayan calendar predicted that on December 21st, 2012, apparently it would be this massive doomsday. No meteors hit, that was all false, that wasn't a real thing. Thanos didn't snap any of us away, nothing like that happened. But that day did mark the end of their 5,125 year-long calendar. Yeah, and you thought you were a planner. Okay. The Mayan calendar is extremely accurate. Their calendar is 10,000ths of a day more exact than the calendar that the world uses today. They're that precise. We have leap years and stuff just to try and correct it. They used 20-day months and had 2 calendar years. They had a 260-day sacred round and then a 365-day year. Every 52 years, these 2 calendars would coincide with one another, and this was referred to as a bundle. Imagine if we still had this now, that'd be so confusing. Like 10, 9, 8, what are we saying? 7. Number 8, chocolate. When I visited the UK, the first thing I noticed was how much better your chocolate was. So good. I'm not sure what y'all are doing over there. Maybe it's just made with love. Who knows? But I'm a huge chocolate guy, and the UK nails it. Yeah, wash it down with some iron brew. Buddy, what a day. What a great day. The Mayans as well, turns out they loved chocolate. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica figured out how to consume chocolate, but the Mayans made it beautiful. They added some spice to it, literally. The Mayans would mix chocolate with water, chili peppers, and honey. They would make a spicy drink. Are you into this idea? Is this making your lips happy right now? Spicy chocolate drinks? My tummy can barely handle a pumpkin spice latte, let alone a Mayan milkshake. No thank you. Number 7. Math. One of the earliest uses of the number 0 being in mathematics came from the Mayans. Thanks, awesome. They were super advanced in their mathematics, I would say for their time, but no, in general they were advanced. We're still trying to understand how they achieved what they did without calculators. It's impressive. They drew complex hieroglyphs on long strips of paper made from fig tree bark. They didn't have much to work with here, yet somehow it was still enough. The Maya numerical system only had 3 symbols. This was long before Bedmaz was born. They had 0, 1, and 5. That's it. You could literally count on one hand. There was a shell shape, a dab, and a bar. These numbers went from 0 to 19, and then they would count groups of 20. By time 36 BC rolled around, the Maya were introducing the concept of 0 into their numbering system. Thanks guys, I failed math twice because of those zeros. Cheers. Number 6, glyphs. Glyphs at number 6, 6 glyphs. One of the most advanced forms of writing when it comes to all these ancient Americans, the Maya were the most ahead of their time. They invented the glyph, which are these symbols that represent a word or a sound. Like anything else in this civilization, it's beautiful to look at, of course. The Maya used around 700 different glyphs. They're detailed, they're beautiful. A good amount we're able to translate today, but there's still a mysterious chunk that we're trying to figure out. The earliest glyphs engravings go back to the 3rd century BC, meaning that the Maya are the pioneers of writing in Mesoamerica. There are only a few civilizations where writing naturally occurred. The Mayans, ancient Chinese, and the ancient Mesopotamians.
Number 5, Harappa. Also known as the Indus Valley Civilization, the Harappans were a fascinating culture based in modern-day Pakistan. The culture is named for the city of Harappa, an unusually large Bronze Age city that held at least 25,000 people. The city exists to this day, though it is significantly degraded. You may not be too surprised by this, the site is several thousand years old after all, but what if I told you this incredible archaeological site was used by the French and British in the 1800s for train track ballast? That's right, one of the largest Bronze Age cities which survived in shockingly good condition for 3,000 years or more was smashed to pieces by the British and French so they could build more railways. There are stories from these times of fascinating inscriptions, technologies, and indications of extraterrestrial contact littered throughout the city, but European greed and colonial drive would see all of these artifacts destroyed, ground up into train track ballast. Number 4. Paracas. The Paracas culture was an Andean civilization that lived on the coast of Peru. The Paracas were incredibly accomplished artists, with highly complex pottery and textiles which use a vast variety of construction and dyeing techniques. But that is not all that makes them such a fascinating culture. They also had highly complex burial practices, with large necropolises, shaft graves, and complex wrappings and burial procedures. But that's not what suggests alien contact. No, what suggests alien contact are the massive geoglyphs, designs and patterns carved into the very earth itself, which can span kilometers of desert and are only visible in their entirety from an aerial point of view. The Nazca lines are far more famous, but the Paracas glyphs predate them by some 1,000 years. The Paracas also constructed their glyphs in more places than just the flat desert, typically on hillsides. Could these be some sort of communication system with an advanced alien civilization? Or are humans just very creative and bored? Number 3. Kerma. Kerma, located in present-day Sudan, was a Neolithic and Chalcolithic city that would become an ancient metropolis. At its peak, Kerma was home to over 10,000 people, and was likely the royal hub of control for the Kerma people. But Kerma, the city, while large and housing thousands, was much more of a necropolis than a metropolis. A large and fascinatingly designed cemetery took up a large section of the city and entombed some 30,000 graves. These cemeteries were arranged in strange clumps, with larger graves in the center surrounded by smaller graves, indicating social stratification and connections. But the size, complexity, and incredible longevity of Kerma has caused some of the more conspiratorial researchers to begin pointing fingers at aliens as an explanation for the complexity. Number 2. Dong Son. The Dong Son culture is a Bronze Age culture from modern Vietnam, based along the Red River Valley in northern Vietnam. They were skilled rice farmers and kept many domesticated animals, including water buffalo and pigs. They were also skilled fishermen and canoe builders. But what really stunned scientists was their incredible mastery of bronze. Not only did the Dong Son have axes, swords, plows, and more made of bronze, but they also had incredibly delicate bronze drums, instruments that would have required a massive amount of precision, skill, and refinement in the art of shaping bronze to create. In fact, it was once believed bronze forging was invented in China and spread throughout Asia from there, but now it is believed the Dong Son, or their predecessors, were actually the ones to first develop such advanced bronze forging. There has long been a theory that metallurgy was introduced to humanity from an exterior source, which would mean the Dong Son would have been the first ones to make contact. Or maybe we figured out smelting all on our own. Who's to say? Number 1. Ptolemaic Egypt. Egypt has long been considered one of the most extraterrestrially influenced cultures in ancient history. Ancient Egypt has a vast timeline spanning from the pre-dynastic period, some 5,500 years ago, to the Roman period, which ended some mere 1,400 years ago. The Ptolemaic period was the one immediately before the Roman period, and is special because of a certain monument that was constructed. Hathor Temple at Dendera was constructed, and a strange series of reliefs were inscribed, which archaeologists have interpreted as a creation myth for the Egyptians put to stone. But many in the modern day have seen these reliefs and interpreted something else. These people instead see Horus holding something akin to a light bulb, with a filament, wire, casing, and all necessary components. Experts have said this is a case of rationalizing the past with our own modern biases. UFO enthusiasts believe this is concrete evidence of ancient contact with the Egyptians.
And we're kicking off the list with the Moai of Easter Island. This mystery gets placed in that same kind of category as the Great Pyramids, where extraterrestrials are often brought into it, because how else did these ancient people construct and move these giant, incredibly heavy statues? The Moai are a pretty mind-boggling feat of ancient engineering. They were carved by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500. They're massive, standing around 13 feet and weighing about 14 tons each. So how the heck did these folks manage to create and move these things. First of all, they carved them out of volcanoes. Then they somehow managed to transport these massive things without any wheels or horses. The main theory, aside from all the alien stuff, is that they laid them flat on a system of sledges made from wood and then used a rocking motion to move them forward. They didn't just plop these statues down wherever they felt like it either. They were strategically placed along ceremonial platforms called ahu, scattered across the island. No one's entirely sure what the significance is of these specific locations. Next up, we have the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are a series of ancient geoglyphs located in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru. They depict various shapes, including animals, plants, and geometric patterns, and the exact purpose and meaning of these etchings, still a mystery. Some theories suggest they might have been used for astronomical or religious purposes, but the strange thing is the scale of the designs means they can really only be appreciated from the air, like looking down. And people weren't really looking down at the Earth 2,000 years ago. So who were these for? Were they used to appease gods? One of the wilder theories is that beings from outer space, again, were involved somehow. There are all kinds of different images depicted here: birds, monkeys, various different plants. But there's also what is often referred to by archaeologists as the astronaut. It looks to be kind of a humanoid figure, but the size of the eyes and the shape of its body resembles maybe some sort of spacesuit or your classic extraterrestrial type being, your standard gray. So pretty interesting stuff. Number 8, the lost colony of Roanoke. In 1587, an attempt was made to establish a colony on Roanoke Island in what is now North Carolina. John White led a group of approximately 115 settlers, which included women and children, to establish this colony. White ended up leaving the island, though, returning to England for more supplies and assistance, leaving these settlers behind. White was unable to return until 3 years later, and this is where the mystery begins. White found the colony completely deserted. There was no sign of settlers. The only clue was the word Croatoan carved into the post and crow on a tree. This is really the only clue we have to go on, and there's speculation that the settlers may have relocated to Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island. There's no definitive answer as to what happened to these people, but there are a couple likely possibilities. One is that the settlers integrated with local Native American tribes on that island, as suggested by the mention of Croatoan. Another theory is that the settlers died from starvation or conflict with said indigenous population. And then there's a third possibility that they were just like, forget this, and opted to sail back to England on some like rickety homemade boats and died at sea. In at number 7 is the Antikythera mechanism. This has to be one of the most amazing artifacts ever discovered. So this object was found in 1901 in the wreckage of an ancient ship off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. It's believed to have been created in order to calculate astronomical positions, but researchers still aren't 100% sure on that. It's dated back around 150 and 100 BC, and for the time, it's a pretty complex device, full of all these complex like sets of gears and dials. It's almost feels like an ancient computer. So the question is, how did the ancient Greeks manage to create something as advanced as this with the more limited resources and knowledge of the time? Just really seems as if there could be a lot more about their civilization we still don't fully comprehend. Next up, we have the case of the Green Children. I absolutely love this story. It is so weird and just very intriguing. In the village of Woolpit in England during the 12th century, two very odd young siblings, a brother and a sister, arrived in town. What made them so strange, you ask? Well, for starters, their skin was green. They also spoke in a tongue that nobody understood and wore these strange clothes that nobody in the village recognized. They would refuse to eat food offered to them initially, but eventually they started to adapt to their new environment. They ended up learning English, and even their skin started taking on a more natural hue. They would go on to explain that they came from a subterranean world where the sun never shined and everyone had green skin. As for how they found themselves in Woolpit, apparently they had been looking after their father's cattle when they heard a loud noise, and then suddenly, bam, they were in the village, as if they'd been transported there in an instant. The brother never made it to adulthood, but his sister ended up going on to lead a pretty normal life for the time. She married a man from the village, started a family. So, what the hell went on here? One explanation is that the youngsters could have had some kind of condition that had turned their skin green. Maybe they'd gotten lost in the woods and got sick and turned kind of greenish too. There's also a theory that maybe they witnessed their family die in like a horrible way, and then made up a wild story about coming from this fantastical place, almost as a way to cope. But that still leaves the clothing and the strange language. One theory is that they could have been migrants who were abandoned by their family, and their language and fashion sense just wasn't known to the people at the time. And then, of course, you got your other fun, much more fantastical theories out there, that perhaps there really was this long-lost civilization that lived underground, or maybe they had crossed over from some alternate dimension. Who knows, right? All we really know is that this is a very strange story from a very long time ago.
How about we learn of another creature for number 5? It's the Sisimite. That's my one name drop. I'm gonna be calling it Sis from here on out, even if it doesn't exactly suit the visual aesthetic of a horrifying deformed Bigfoot. That's essentially what this creature is, a shaggy 6 to 8 foot tall Mesoamerican monster with only 4 fingers and no thumbs, backward facing feet and no knees. Its face is ape-like with teeth of a jaguar, and it can only communicate through howling screams. As a result, the Sis craves to gain the power of speech like humans. Ellen Danien, the curator of Painted Metaphors, wrote, if a woman sees a cis, her life is indefinitely prolonged. But if a man never lives more than a month after he's looked into the eyes of the monster. That doesn't mean women are safe, however. It's said that cis targets and steals human women, and should she not fall in love with the cis, the woman will inevitably be devoured. But if tall, dark, and hairy with no knees is your type, he may grant you magical powers for loving him. Don't worry, if you come across a cis, there's a laundry list of things you can do to protect yourself, such as dance in a circle since it'll trip over itself, or just bring a dog or water to splash on it. Concerned with good and evil dualities, this legend tells the story of 2 warrior trees. Number 4. The brothers' names were Kinch, who was gentle and noble, and Tisik, who was arrogant and ruthless. One day, they met Nikteha, a beautiful and intelligent princess who conquered the hearts of both men. Both fell instantly in love and vied for the woman, but obviously only one could have her, so Tisik challenged his brother to a duel to the death. This decision angered the gods, who covered the sky in thick clouds and hid the moon from sight as the two fought. But there was no winner. Both fighters are mortally injured by the other and collapsed to the ground. You may be wondering, would it have been easier to ask Nikteha if who she wanted to have in the first place? Probably, but she may have not wanted either for all they know, as neither had ever asked, and now they're dead. Desperate to see her again, and full of regret for the death of each other, the 2 brothers asked the gods to return to Earth once more. The gods accepted, but warned the brothers could only come back as trees. Now you can see the warrior siblings in the jungle in the form of the Chichen and Chaka trees. The first, evil still in an arboreal reincarnation, oozes a highly irritating toxin. Meanwhile, the Chaka, the good guy, produces a soothing sage that acts as an antidote. These 2 trees only ever grow next to one another. Number 3 will be the story of the jaguar and the skunk. Once there was a jaguar and then Miss Skunk. Miss Skunk had a son, blessed by the jaguar, who the jaguar visits one day, telling Miss Skunk it's time to teach the boy to hunt. Miss Skunk tries to argue that the distance is too far and the task too dangerous. What if something was to happen and she can't make it in time? But little Skunk insists on going and leaves with Jaguar for the riverbed. The 2 came upon the river, and the jaguar states this is where they were to eat, and that he must sharpen his knives, referring to his claws. After doing so, he tells little Skunk, now you're you're going to be on guard because I am going to be asleep. When you see them come, wake me up. Don't shout. Scratch my belly so I won't alarm them. But don't wake me up if it's just any old little animal without antlers coming along. Only when the big antlers get here. Little Skunk agrees and sits on guard for his godfather Jaguar as he sleeps until one with big antlers comes. Little Skunk does as instructed and Jaguar takes the animal down. Together the two eat and bring the rest of the carcass back to Miss Skunk, who has her fill and stores the rest as Jaguar leaves. Time goes by and the meat is once again deplenished. Little Skunk decides he must go hunting, but without calling Jaguar. His mother begs otherwise, but cannot stop him. Little Skunk mimics the actions of Jaguar. He sharpens his little claws and waits on the riverbed, deciding like Jaguar to hunt the large animals, not the little ones his own size, and sleeps until he is awakened by the trot of the big antlered animal. Little Skunk attacks, thinking he's as strong and big as his godfather, only to hang from the neck of the steed with his claws until suddenly thrown off. Little Skunk lands on his back, mouth left wide open in surprise, and Miss Skunk begins to worry. Why hadn't her son come back yet? Where was he? She decides to go look for him and sees the trotted path the antler creature made and begins to cry, following it, where she finally sees her son. Miss Skunk sees Little Skunk's open mouth and relieved says, "Son, what are you laughing at? All your teeth are showing." She approaches closer, telling her son, "Give me your hand, I've come to get you, but you're just laughing in my face." But as Mother Skunk lays her hand upon him, thinking he is alive, she notices Little Skunk was long since dead and begins to cry once more. Can you decipher the meaning of this story? Comment below. Number 2 is literally the stuff of my nightmares. It's the LP. They are what I am, a person, but smaller. That's the only way I can say it without saying it, but it's super easy to devise. These creatures live in the Yucatan Peninsula, but in many other indigenous lands, such as right here in North America, which is why I'm not taking any risks. Typically invisible to humans, they were capable of becoming visible when they want, but are typically found in natural areas, including jungles, forests, fields, and caves. When visible, the LPs are only knee-high and have wide, owl-like reddish eyes. They're also quick in their movements, destroying their surroundings. If someone was having a string of significant bad luck, it is believed that they must have done something to displease or become cursed with one of these LPs. You can rid of them by calling on ancestral protection or even providing offerings like shelter, food, or tobacco. But LPs aren't only known for their chaos. If handled in approaches correctly, they can be good luck for farmlands. Many farmers have proudly turned to the LPs for decades and help keeping their farms safe. However, as stated, locals and visitors alike should avoid calling the LP by any of its names, since it may summon it to you and cause a bout of immediate torment as a revenge. Alrighty, last on the list, number 1 is how the Bird King was chosen. Maya land was looked upon by Halak Yunik, the Great Spirit. His will was law, and after growing tired of the constant fights amongst the birds, he gathered them at the center of the jungle and announced a king must be chosen. Of course, every bird felt it possessed the best qualifications. Kolpolche, the cardinal, says no one else is as bright a red and so beautiful as he struts. Hekolkolchek, the mockingbird, trills that they are the only bird with such a lovely voice and that everyone should listen to them. To prove his point, he trilled out an enrapturing song, one that the wild turkey interrupts with a gobble, stating, "There's no doubt I should be king because I'm the biggest and strongest bird. I can stop fights and defend any of you." The birds continue to display their grandeur, while in the background, Kukul, the Quetzal, remained quiet. Elegant in manners and figure, but plumage shabby. Kukul knew he would be the best king, but he wouldn't be chosen if dressed so poorly, so he approached the Roadrunner, a trusted friend, and asked for his feathers, offering to share wealth and honors with him in return. When the Roadrunner finally agrees, one by one his feathers disappear, joining the plumage of the Kukal, whose body now shimmered an iridescent hue of blues and greens, his breast the color of tropical sunset, and the 4-foot feathered tail followed behind his dainty walk. Kukul had become the peacock, and his visage awarded him the role of king. The birds returned to their respective homes and Kukal to his new duties, but the peacock becomes too busy and forgets his promise to the Roadrunner. A group of birds soon seek out the missing Roadrunner to find him naked and nearly dead from the cold. Together the birds give him honey and each take feathers from their own plumage to give to him. The Roadrunner told his friends of the cruel deception of Kukul and kept repeating, "Where is he? Where is he?" which in Maya sounds like Pahoy, Pahoy, the call of a Roadrunner. And that's why today the Roadrunner's feather remains so oddly colored and patchy and patterned. The bird always watching the Maya roads, searching for the Quetzal that stole his plumage, shouting out Pahoy, Pahoy as he searches.
Number 10, Shang and Zhou Dynasty. Excavations of Shang Dynasty burial sites have revealed that the presence of human sacrificial victims. In some tombs, pits containing the remains of individuals possibly sacrificed attendants of prisoner of war have been found. In the Book of Rites, a Confucian classic that is part of Chinese canonical texts, include the descriptions of rituals and ceremonies during the Zhou Dynasty. It's mentioned that sacrificial practices involving animals and sometimes humans, as the human sacrifices were seen as a way to communicate with the ancestors and deities. Archaeological excavations of the Zhou Dynasty sites have uncovered evidence of human sacrifice. Sacrificial pits containing the remains of both animal and humans, possibly captives, or individuals associated with the deceased, have been found in tombs. sacrifices. Number 9, Phoenician civilization. With the notion of the human sacrifice concept among the Phoenicians is intriguing and has been subject of historical inquiry. It remains an era where evidence is not entirely conclusive. Classical authors, including ancient Greek and Roman writers, occasionally mention that the practice of child sacrifice among the Phoenicians was prevalent. The most common cited source is that of the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote about the sacrifices made during the time of crisis. However, it's crucial to approach these accounts critically, as they're often based on secondhand information and cultural biases. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of child burials in certain Phoenician contexts. Some researchers interpret these findings as possible instances of human sacrifice, while others argue that the alternative explanations could just be a burial custom or natural causes that also should be considered. Number 8, Celtic Druids. As again, there is more concrete evidence with the Celts engaging in animal sacrifices. Archaeological findings such as animal bones in ritualistic contexts suggest that the Celts conducted ceremonies including the sacrifice of animals. However, Julius Caesar, in his writing on the Gallic Wars, mentioned that the Druids were the religious elite among the Celts and that they had a great influence in matters of both religion and governance. He suggested that the Druids performed human sacrifices, particularly around this time of crisis, inside large wicker effigies or cages. Other classical writers such as the Greek historian Strabo and the Roman poet Lucian also made references of Druidic practices, including the suggestion of human sacrifices. But again, however, with these accounts are often secondhand and influenced by the biases of the time. Especially when it came to interest in occupying more land, nations would do anything to justify their wars to steal land from the indigenous people. Number 7, Mochi civilization. The Mochi civilization, also known as Mochia, thrived on the north coast of Peru from around 200 BCE to 800 CE. The Mochi was renowned for their advanced artistic and architectural achievements. Whoa, I don't know that much of A's. While evidence of human sacrifices in Mochi society is not as extensively documented as in some other ancient civilizations, there are indications that ritualistic practices, including human sacrifice, were part of the religious and ceremonial activities. There are illustrations of warriors or priests holding severed heads or bound captives in sacrificial contexts, as some of their larger ceremony centers such as Huaca de la Luna, which shows evidence of complex rituals, including the burial of individuals with signs of violent death. These findings suggest that the certain individuals may have been sacrificed during important ceremonies or events. Number 6, Inca Empire. Yes, the Inca Empire is one of on the list when it comes to unspeakable acts in ancient civilizations, specifically, as you might guess, human sacrifices. The Incas conducted a ritual known as Capacocha, which involved the sacrifice of humans, particularly children. These sacrifices were often made at significant locations such as the mountain summits or lake shores. The victims were carefully selected and prepared for the ritual, sometimes adorned with elaborate attire and offerings. Human sacrifices were often made as offerings to the mountain spirits known as Apus, which was considered sacred in Inca cosmology. The belief was that these sacrifices would ensure the well-being of the empire, avert natural disasters, and maintain harmony with the gods. Children were frequently chosen as sacrificial victims, perhaps because of their, perceived purity. The bodies of these children were often buried in fetal position, and some were found with valuable objects and textiles. Sacrifices, particularly those involving in war captives, may have been seen as a form of tribute to the Inca rulers, showcasing the subjugation of rival groups and the extension of Inca influences.
Alright, now on to number 5, which will be the new ancient city. We have not had a break from rocks since our first point, but guess what this city's name is? Utucumne. What's that mean in Mayan? Stone column. Don't think you escaped from the rocks. And speaking of escaping, that's exactly what this city did for a very long time. It went completely unnoticed until thanks to the recent approval of airborne laser scanning on the central Mayan lowlands. After receiving LiDAR images showing man-made changes to the landscape, Ivan Sprach and his team thrashed their way through 60 kilometers of vegetation to reach this site. On the elevated terrain, they found several large buildings, including a number of pyramid-shaped ones measuring more than 15 meters. The cylindrical stone columns, which prompted the researchers to name the site Ulacumna, were probably entrances to rooms in the upper parts of the buildings. The team has also found altars, 3 plazas, and a ball court. Pottery unearthed at the site appears to indicate it was inhabited between 600 and 800 AD, a period known as Late Classic. But Sprach said the site probably underwent considerable changes between 800 and 1000 AD before falling victim to the collapse of the lowland Maya civilization in the 10th century. A mystery they're still hoping that the rediscovery of this lost Maya city can help unwind. Was it environmental degradation, political unrest, warfare, or the decline of trade networks? Number 4 is coming, and he's a terror. The plight of gods, the destroyer of man. He is Smoking Frog, the Conqueror. It really is an unenviable job to be the decipherer of Mayan script, which utilized logograms, symbols, and glyphs that were near impossible to comprehend. And hallelujah, someone recently figured out that the little pictures were in fact words. So, the secrets of numerous surviving stelae and inscriptions from the many Maya ruins are finally coming into light, such as the events from the 14th of January 378 AD. That was the day when a foreign warlord, Siya Kaka, conquered Tikal in the most powerful of all Mayan cities. He had been dubbed Smoking Frog because his glyph looked like a smoking frog. Siya's name actually means fire is born, and he was an exceptionally powerful man who hailed from Teotihuacana. Oh, you know, just the most advanced Mesoamerican civilization that we know nothing about to this day, like their ethnicity, appearance, economics, or culture. Just poof, nothing in history. We do know it was a super city, however, which of course placed it in direct conflict with the equally powerful Maya civilization. So, from what historians can gather, the king of Teo set Fire is Born, who is either his brother or his right-hand man, off to go F up the Maya Empire. Several recently discovered stelae help scholars piece together the puzzle of Siya and the movements towards Tikal, mapping his path. Word must have traveled to Tikal of the invasion, and the forces met for a battle 16 miles from the city. This meant that an entirely new era was beginning in the metropolis, as all subsequently erected stelae would tell of Siya and his successors. This story truly is insane, but to dive into details would make it run long, so we'll stick a pin in that for now and move on to unraveling the Red Queen, which is number 3. Archaeologists claim that only 10% of the ancient Maya city of Palenque has been explored so far. Among the ruins of Temple X111, where in 1994, Mexican archaeologist Arnaldo Gonzalez Cruz and his team made a legendary discovery, a tomb dating back to 600 or 700 AD. Excavations were being carried out at the temple to discover its construction sequence and the methods used in building it, with no prior knowledge of burials there. Then they stumble upon what's starting to seem like a big old tomb, attention focused to cleaning its area, and they discover a small blocked up door on a second level of the temple plaza. When they remove the block, it reveals a long corridor leading to one of the best preserved galleries discovered in Palenque to date. A few meters later, and there she was. The sarcophagus was a massive square of limestone, and inside was the remains of a noblewoman and other objects painted and powdered with red cinnabar, earning her the name the Red Queen. This is the richest known burial for female Maya leader. She has a headdress of green stone and shell, a collar of shell and bead, a diadem of apple green jade loops, and then there's the funerary mask, with obsidian eyes conveying a striking sense of the presence of a queen. Inside the sarcophagus, archaeologists also discover a seashell with a small limestone figure in it, which is pretty cute. Oh, and then there's also some guy buried in the chamber too, but it's assumed he's a servant sent to the afterlife to serve her. He's just Ken though, so back to Barbie. Researchers found that she lived between 600 and 700 AD, and while her name is nowhere found in the tomb, Gonzalez Cruz believes that she was Tizaki Awa, the wife of Pakal and the grandmother of the last Mayan king. The remains of the Red Queen were returned to Palenque in June of 2012. She couldn't be reburied in her original tomb due to the high humidity, so she's reburied in a different one close to the location of her ancient home. In July of 2018, her funerary finery, including the burial jewelry and the death mask, were restored by archaeologists and historians and put on display in Mexico City. Speaking of the dead, number 2, the entrance to hell. When the meteor that destroyed the dinosaurs landed, it landed and hit the water near Hucanta. Sands there became porous, turning most of it into thick rock, but also giving it the ability to waste away with time and form sinkholes, aka cenoids, which people like to swim in on vacation, and Mayas believed were literal access to hell. So, Gilmore de Anda's team spent 5 years looking at 450-year-old historical records from the Spanish Inquisition to locate a series of sacred caves believed to be the Hell Passageway. The Spanish had been outraged that the Mayas continued practicing their old religion even after the persecution, so they used court trials to make them reveal the locations of the places where they performed ceremonies. That testimony leads de Anda to X on the map. Among de Anda's discoveries are broad, perfectly paved underground roads stretching 100 meters, a submerged temple, walled-off stone rooms, and the confusing crossroads of legends. In one chamber, it's impossible to move without slashing your skin, which is a representation of the Room of Knives. While de Anda has not yet encountered a specific jaguar chamber, jaguar bones have been found in at least one cave. Subterranean roads interrupted by deep pools of water may signify the rivers of blood and pus. Why go into the trouble of reproducing a hell? Perhaps it was a way to demonstrate power, de Anda said, or to give an idea of the terrors that they would meet en route to paradise. For now, de Anda's team is connecting tunnels and caves looking to uncover more. The most emotional for last, number 1, will be They Burned Books, aka the July 12, 1562 tragedy at Mani. What can only be called a literal villain to history is a monstrous man named Friar Diego de Landa, whose act act of faith at the city of Mani Yucatan is the most significant example of historic destruction or burning of the Maya books. Something he documented with excitement and pride in 1566 as he had removed the demons from indigenous hearts. Diego de Landa was among the first Franciscans to arrive in Yucatan. He took the time to learn the language and mirrored cultural behaviors to start earning the trust of the 19 independent chiefdoms. This is the first time he sees Maya texts, which he interprets as idolatry and messages from the devil. In fact, they're written records of the indigenous communities, histories, crops, laws, land, and legends. It was around this time he decided to use physicality to force conversion. He persisted in eradicating traditional indigenous beliefs through extreme violence and torment, and encouraged the other friars and lay people to do so as well. Indigenous Mayans began to take their own lives in response. Then comes the day. It's July 1562, and two boys exploring find a hidden cave in Mani where a shrine and altar had been set up. They snitch to the friar, who assembles a mob. People were burned in their thatched house, some flogged, many ran to take their own lives, and others were just killed. Then came the burning. The friars, under Diego's demands, raid the homes that still stand. Their written records are stolen, as are their clay idols that hold the ashes of their ancestors. And in a bonfire facing the monastery, all were burned. Everything. These wooden clay representations of their ancestors filled with ash, their family documents and history, all integral to the descendants' inheritance. The foreign priests understood the significance of what they called superstition and idolatry when they burned these idols. By destroying these articles, they literally ripped people's identities away from them, their standing in the community, and their title to their land and property. The ancestral traditions lost lie at the roots of this tragedy, as does the history we will never regain. Despite an estimated 90% of Mayas dying from disease, war, and forced labor during the 16th century Spanish conquest, I want to make it clear, Maya people and culture has never disappeared. An estimated 6 million Maya people still live in Guatemala, Belize, the West Honduras, Salvador, and southern Mexico alone.
Coming in at number 10, Nineveh. The Nineveh civilization was one of the oldest and most impressive civilizations of the ancient world. Located in what is now modern-day Mosul in Iraq, this civilization thrived mostly under the rule of King Sennacherib from 704 BC to 681 BC. Under his leadership, Nineveh was made the capital of the Assyrian Empire. Their kingdom was massive and had a lot of impressive infrastructure, like a 15-gate wall around the city, as well as parks, aqueducts, canals, and an 80-room palace. This place was so extravagant that some scholars today believe that the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon were actually located in Nineveh and were commissioned by King Sennacherib. Other than their infrastructure, their culture was also incredibly impressive as well. Nineveh was known as a center for the development of arts, sciences, and architecture, and scribes and scholars from elsewhere would flock to Nineveh to further their studies. They had a library that contained over 30,000 inscribed clay tablets, and one of those tablets included a story of a great flood that drowned the world except for one man who survived by building a boat and searching for dry land. Does that story sound familiar? It might, since it's an early version of the story of Noah's Ark. This version of the story, though, was inscribed 1,000 years before it ever reached Hebrew text. Now, even though this was a large and powerful civilization, all good things must come to an end, and they met their end after a royal feud led to the breakup, and this led to the joint forces of Persians, Babylonians, and others in the area to burning Nineveh to the ground.
Number 9. The Mesopotamian civilization. Next up, we have the first civilization ever recorded in history. Their origins date back to as early as 500 BC in what's now Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Mesopotamia is a staple in history. It's actually the first society that developed agriculture, and its name translates to between rivers or land between rivers. It was a perfect spot to domesticate animals for farming and for food. The oldest wheel ever was found in southern Mesopotamian city of Ur. They invented the wheel, cursive writing, and something even more important than all, they invented beer. The oldest recipe for beer comes from Mesopotamia. Wheels, poems, beer, this sounds like the world's oldest, and dare I say it, best party. Of course, aliens also come into play too when looking back at Mesopotamian culture. They had an advanced understanding of the cosmos using astronomical instruments. Now, one of these instruments was this Venus tablet of Ammisadaka, which could predict these astronomical events. Maybe our earliest civilization made contact and now they're just trying to reach out. Can you get ghosted over a tablet? Probably.
At number 8, Vinca. We're throwing it all the way back to the Neolithic period because we're talking about the Vinca civilization. Vinca is known as the oldest Neolithic civilization in Europe. These guys were establishing their own civilization in the Stone Age long before civilizations like Egypt and Mesopotamia. Though we don't know all that much about them, we do know that they had one of the earliest writing systems in the world. Researchers have discovered around 700 characters that are believed to have been their way of forming written sentences, though this is all just a theory for now since these characters have yet to be translated. The archaeological evidence that has been found from the Vinca civilization suggests that this group of people thrived in the area along the banks of the Danube River for more than 1,000 years before being abandoned. No one really knows why the Vinca civilization abandoned the area or where they went, but maybe one day we will get those answers.
Number 7, the Mayans. It's 2021, which means the world thankfully didn't end in 2012. But that movie was good. Kind of, not really. But the Mayan calendar did predict that on December 21st, 2012, this would be the end of us. No meteors hit and Thanos didn't snap away any of us, but that date did mark the end of their 5,125 year-long count calendar. Yeah, and you thought you were a planner. These guys were crazy. One of the earliest uses of the number 0 being in mathematics came from the Mayans. They were super advanced for their time, and they were also quite artistic. They drew complex hieroglyphs on long strips of paper made from fig tree bark. I can't write 4 sentences down on paper without my wrist hurting. I have to slap it around for a minute. These guys are on a whole new level. These stories date all the way back to the late pre-classic period, so around 300 BCE. That is so old. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica figured out how to consume chocolate, sure, but like the art that we see etched into the stone walls around them, the Mayans made it beautiful. The Mayans would mix chocolate with water and chili peppers and honey. They would make it as a spicy drink. I'm gonna stick with the old pumpkin spice for now. I think that's the riskiest I'll go. Thanks so much though. Debit.
At number 6, Mehergar. Even though Mehergar was a pretty impressive civilization, no one really knows about it because very little interest was invested in learning more about it. Mehergar was one of the oldest civilizations in the world, situated in what is now modern-day Pakistan. Excavations of the site started back in the 1970s, but due to the government's lack of interest, looting, and land erosion, it made it hard to learn much about this ancient settlement. From evidence that has been gathered, we do know that Mehergar had a population of around 25,000 people, and based on some of the remains recovered from this ancient civilization, there was evidence of dental surgery, which, as you can imagine, isn't really something you see very often, especially at the time that this civilization existed. Other than that, many of the other secrets of the civilization are buried very deep in the earth, so it makes it much harder for researchers to uncover them. What has been found though are some pretty well preserved buildings made from brick, and even a formal cemetery. Who knows what else we might learn from this site. At number 5, Popol Vuh. Just about every civilization has their interpretation of Earth's origins. Some cultures believe that cosmic beings made the Earth, others believed in various gods and various motivations for creating life. One ancient text that was discovered by researchers tells the story of the Maya and their belief of how the world was created. This ancient text, known as Popol Vuh, which ultimately is translated to Book of Council, is a mythical origin story. According to the tales written in this ancient text, the forefather gods, quote, brought forth the earth from a watery void and endowed it with animals and plants, end quote. The text also describes how the gods had difficulties making humans and tells the story of how they created 2 hero twins who went on a series of adventures and even defeated the Lord of the Underworld. The earliest surviving copy of Popol Vuh dates back to 1701, but it is believed that there were earlier copies of the text that might not have been found or have been lost. At number 4, Copper Scroll. Next up, let's talk about another ancient text that discusses the existence of a large treasure. An ancient Hebrew text called the Copper Scroll was found in a cave in the Judean desert. This ancient text is believed to contain recorded details of a vast treasure that may include gold, silver, vessels, and coins. The Copper Scroll dates back to sometime around 70 CE, which coincides with a time when the Roman army laid siege to Jerusalem and the Second Temple, a Jewish holy temple which stood on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, was destroyed. Researchers are still unsure if these treasures described in the Copper Scroll actually exist, as it is still highly debated. Even if these treasures really did exist, it could have already been found back in ancient times, but even still, no treasure as large as the one described in the scroll have been found in Israel or Palestine. At number 3, Dresden Codex. For researchers, being able to find ancient texts is very exciting because it can teach them a lot about a civilization, its people, and their beliefs. However, they're often pretty hard to come by due to a number of reasons like poor preservation, warfare, looting, and more. In the case of the Mayans, many of their artifacts and written documents were believed to have been destroyed by Christian missionaries trying to wipe out any non-Christian beliefs, so when one of their ancient texts is found, it's a pretty big deal. When the Dresden Codex was found, it was a huge accomplishment for researchers. The Dresden Codex Codex is an ancient Mayan document that dates back 800 years and contains 39 sheets of text with beautifully drawn images and text on both sides. Researchers done on this codex indicate that it is a record of the phases of the planet Venus so that the Maya, quote, would be certain that their ceremonial events were being held on the correct day. End quote. The codex first appeared in Germany in 1730, but no one really knows how it got there. At number 2, Voynich manuscript. Now this next ancient text is pretty mysterious simply because no one can read it. Dun dun dun! That's right, the Voynich manuscript, a 250-page book containing illustrations of plants, cosmological symbols, and naked ladies, is carbon dated to have originated sometime in the 15th century. It also contains unreadable text. This book was first discovered in 1912 by an antique book dealer, and since then, the text in the book has yet to have been deciphered. There is speculation amongst researchers that suggests that perhaps the language in this book is a lost language or code, or perhaps just gibberish. However, a recent study of the book's language suggests that it does have the hallmarks of a real language. You know what I think the Voynich manuscript is? An alien document. Think about it. Aliens came to Earth and they documented what they saw, like native plant species and humans, hence the drawings of women, because come on, how can you not be obsessed with women? Right? And these cosmological symbols found in the book would also be tied to the aliens because of course they're from outer space. But what do you guys think? And finally, at number 1, Handbook of Ritual Power. Saving the best and most mysterious ancient text for last, we have the Handbook of Ritual Power. This is a 20-page ancient codex that dates back around 1300 years and is written in Coptic. What's so interesting and mysterious about this little book is its contents. Within the 20 pages of this ancient book are magic spells and formulas, including love spells, spells for curing black jaundice, and even instructions on how to perform an exorcism. It's believed that this ancient text may have been written by a group of Sethians, an ancient Christian sect who praised Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. What adds to the already mysterious contents of the book is the book's opening, as it references a mysterious unknown figure named Bactiotha. A translation of the opening text of the handbook reads, quote, I give thanks to you and I call upon you the Bactiotha, the great one who is very trustworthy, the one who is lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents. End quote. The book is now housed in a museum in Sydney after they purchased it from an antiquities dealer in Vienna. How this dealer acquired the book though remains unknown.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Olmec colossal heads. The Olmec civilization has often been referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, and from somewhere between 1400 to 400 BC, the civilization rose in the Mexican Gulf Coast. Now, over 2 millennia later, in 1862, a farmer was digging that very same land that they once lived on, and he came across an extremely large stone head. From here, research continued, and this turned out to be one of 17 stone heads that are thought to have been portraits of the rulers at the time. The statues are all somewhere from 5 to 10 feet tall, and they are extremely heavy. Like heavier than a full-grown elephant. I guess that's how we're measuring weight now. Some use imperial, some use metric. I use elephants. The reason it is believed that these stone heads were made to model rulers of the time is because they all share similar features, but they are each made with different expressions, slightly different facial features, and different headdresses. While the first discovery of the stone head was close to the source of the basalt stone that was used to make them, most of the heads are like 60 miles away from there. So we have absolutely no idea how these ancient people were able to make these stones. We just know it wasn't an easy task by any means. In our number 9 spot today, we have the works of old men. The works of old men are structures that were first observed from the air by a British pilot in 1927, and they are located near the Azraq Oasis in Jordan. There are hundreds of these wheel-like structures that are each over 80 feet wide, some even as large as 200 feet. These huge structures have been dated back so far that they might just be the oldest man-made creations that we have ever found. While this is all amazing, we have absolutely no idea what they are or why they were created. The theories range from things like sun tracking to cemeteries to some sort of spiritual relevance, but we really just aren't sure. While things like this are incredible finds, and it's amazing that some of the first man-made things still exist on our Earth, it is so crazy how we have no idea what they are or how to use them, and unfortunately, especially because of the fact that it's been thousands and thousands of years, it's most likely that the mysteries surrounding them are totally lost with the past. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Siege of Masada. The Siege of Masada took place in 73 AD after the fall of Jerusalem, and it was one of the final events of the First Jewish-Roman War. The event took place on and around a large hilltop in what is now current-day Israel, but here's where this ancient mega project comes in. The Romans began to build a massive earth ramp on the western side of the fortress of Masada. They managed to build it all while under the constant fire from those defending the area, and it was still just under 2,000 feet long, and it rose up 200 feet in the air. After building this ramp, they then managed to push a siege tower up the ramp. This ramp does mostly still exist, and basically what they ended up doing was like extending the size of the mountain that Masada was built on. It is absolutely insane that they did all of this just to capture people. All of that for like 960 people. Imagine if we had ancient Romans now. Suddenly all of our cities would be actually accessible. Ramps for everyone. In our number 7 spot today we have Stonehenge. Perhaps the most famous of all of the monuments on this list, this prehistoric monument is located in England, and it is a set of stones that are oriented towards the sunrise on the summer solstice. This stone monument is thought to have been created somewhere from 3000 to 2000 BC, and it truly is one of the most famous landmarks ever. Stonehenge is thought to have been an ancient burial ground right from early in its creation for somewhere around 500 years. There are many theories surrounding this incredible monument regarding who could have created it, as experts just aren't quite sure. Since this was from a time before we had written records, we may just never know. Maybe this one is just destined to stay a mystery. In our number 6 spot today we have the Yonaguni Monument. Just off of the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, there is a diving location that was first discovered in 1986 by a diver. He noticed some strange sort of formation that was located on the seabed that looked as if it could be some sort of structure, so he swam down to go and investigate. When he went down and didn't find any more answers to his questions, he of course had to spill the tea on what he had stumbled upon. When researchers heard about this, they ended up diving down to check out what this formation could be, and thus the Yonaguni Monument was officially considered discovered. This monument, which kind of resembles stairs made for giants, is made of sandstone and limestone, but there's one super mysterious thing about it. Experts cannot agree on the origins of this thing. Some people believe it was a naturally occurring formation, while others swear that it was man-made. The Yonaguni Monument is at least 10,000 years old, so at the end of the day, anyone's guess is as good as mine.
Number 5. Egypt. An ancient civilization in northeast Africa situated on the Nile Valley, somewhere around 3100 BCE, splitting Upper and Lower Egypt. First occurring as a series of stable kingdoms, separated by intermediate periods such as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, Egypt was invaded by a number of foreign powers, including the Libyans, the Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Macedonians, and of course, the Greeks. Predictable flooding meant a timed surplus of crops, which supported larger populations year after year. The many achievements of these people include immense quarrying, surveying, and construction, using a system of mathematics and science to build and organize what we still visit today. Medicine, irrigation, boat making, the Egyptians did it all. They pushed the boundaries with glass technology, and even invented new forms of literature, and even coined the earliest known drummed up peace treaty. Yeah, don't even get me started on the Sphinx. Have you seen this thing? It's practically being held together with glue and tape at this point. Number 4. Mesopotamia, the land of two rivers. Around 10,000 BCE, in what is now modern-day Iraq, some of the first fully developed Neolithic cultures began to settle in this fertile crescent, known biblically and famously as Mesopotamia. Around 8000 BCE, people in northern Mesopotamia began to cultivate barley and wheat, in which made beer, gruel, soup, and eventually even bread. This is where the earliest signs of civilization began. They were the first to develop trades such as weaving, leatherwork, metalwork, masonry. One of the greatest achievements of ancient Mesopotamia was the invention of the wheel, sometime around 3500 BCE. Mathematics and science was based on a numerical system of 60. This is the source of the 60-minute hour, the 24-hour day, and the 360-degree circle. The Sumerian calendar was 3 7-day weeks of a lunar month. They were so smart, the astronomers could predict eclipses and solstices. Beer, a calendar, and some wheels? Life was simple back then, huh? Like just not a care in the world. Number 3. The Maya.
The Mesoamerican civilization of the Maya was roughly between 1800 BC and 900 AD, located within the archaeological site and the city of San Juan Teotihuacan municipality in the state of Mexico. This site has been classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1987. Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas with a population between 125,000 and at its peak, millions, making it at least the 6th largest city in the world during its reign. The Maya script is the most sophisticated, highly developed writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. Hieroglyphic writing was being used by the 3rd century. They are known for their art, math, calendars, and astronomical systems. Architecturally, the city consisted of palaces, ceremonial ball courts for sport and sacrifice, and of course, structures precisely aligned for astronomical observation. Number 2. Rome. In modern history, ancient Rome refers to the Roman civilization from the founding of the city in the 8th century BC to the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. It encompasses the Roman Kingdom, Roman Republic, and Roman Empire. It began as an Italic settlement. The settlement grew into the city of Rome, eventually controlling its neighbors through a combination of treaties and military strength. It eventually dominated and acquired much of Europe, and of that, the surrounding Mediterranean Sea. One of the largest empires in the ancient world. At one point, roughly a quarter of the world's population. Contributed to modern language, religion, society, technology, government, warfare, art. Do as the Romans do, right? Its military created a system of government which was the inspiration for modern republics such as the United States and France. They achieved impressive feats, such as the empire-wide construction of bridges, ports, and roads, as well as the monuments and megalithic buildings splattered all around the world. Every time I flush a toilet, I'm like, man, these guys were good. Number 1. Turkey. Located in the foothills of the Taurus Mountains, we arrive at Göbekli Tepe. This Neolithic site lays in the southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey and is dated around 9500 BCE. The site consists of a number of large circular structures supported by massive stone pillars. Long story short, it's the first construction site of anything ever. The pillars are richly decorated with abstract, anthropomorphic carvings of people, clothing, and wild animals, thus providing archaeologists insight into this prehistoric peoples and what they were about. Considered the oldest permanent human settlements anywhere in the world, historians link this revolution to the invention and precursor of agriculture. Göbekli Tepe is a monumental complex built on the top of a rocky mountain far from any known sources of water, and having produced no evidence of agricultural has sparked numerous debates over the years. The site's original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, described it as the Earth's first temple ever, a sanctuary used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from all over the world with no permanent inhabitants. Classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2018, radiocarbon dating shows that the earliest exposed structures at Göbekli Tepe were built around 11,500 years ago. It's regarded by some as the archaeological discovery of many lifetimes, since it profoundly changed the understanding of the development of human society and when it exactly started.